Welcome to Amazing Applications. Hi, it's Neil Benson from Customery. It's great to have you join me. Thanks so much for downloading another episode. Today, I'm going to be talking with Matthew Venamore. He's a Dynamics 365 Scrum Master. He runs his own consultancy business called Empirics, and he's based here in Queensland. Matthew and I worked together for over 3 years at the Royal Automobile Club of Queensland, and recently he stepped back in as a Scrum Master with one of my teams. And I wanted to find out from Matthew, what's it like diving back into an existing team that's already been going for several sprints and are partway through a project. This is episode 144. You'll find show notes with timestamps, a transcript, and other resources at amazingapps.show/144. Let's meet Matthew Venamore. Matt, welcome to Amazing Applications. It's great to finally have you on the show.
Yeah, I know. We've been talking about it for a few years, I think, actually, haven't we?
That's right. So we wanted to get right into it. You and I have worked together for 3 or 4 years, delivering Dynamics 365 and Power Platform applications. You've recently joined one of my teams as a Scrum Master into a pre-existing team. What's that like? What was it like coming in as a new Scrum Master into a pre-existing team? How have you found it so far?
It's always challenging. Because one of the outcomes that I always try to achieve is, as a Scrum Master, is to have an empowered team. So coming in and identifying all the things that need to be changed is not a great way of doing that. I don't think. So a lot of it is it's a very sort of standoffish stance that I take when I go into that sort of position. Yeah, because I've done it in this role and my last role as well. So it's really just sort of giving yourself a few weeks to step back, understand the team, understand the people, how they work, and those sorts of things. And just allowing them to sort of keep doing what they were doing, just so you can observe, really.
Right.
And use that as an observation period to work out better ways of doing things or ways that you can add the most value to the team.
So you don't recommend just diving into the first sprint planning meeting and driving it to an outcome and telling the team what to do and set themselves better goals and things?
No. That all comes with time, definitely. Because I think if you sort of come in and you sort of start, even with just making suggestion after suggestion of, change this, improve this, there, all those sorts of things. I think you would tend to come off as not a servant leader, more as a leader, of trying to drive the direction rather than being the person there who's to support them in that approach. So that's I think a more scrummy sort of way of approaching it.
Good. Do you have a checklist or a framework in mind whenever you're trying to assess a team's current performance, find out where their weak spots are, where their strengths are, or do you just use that time to observe and let that information flow into your head and seep into your consciousness before you take any action? How do you approach it?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, actually. A little from column A, a little from column B.
Okay.
So I constantly, even at the moment in my other browser session, I've got the Scrum Guide sitting there. I refer back to that more than you would probably think, even though it's short, that Scrum Guide, it's only 13, 14 pages. I still don't know it back to front. So I do like using that as my framework. I keep, when I then have those sessions, when I then have that sort of first period of observation, that's just what I'm comparing everything against, really. So yeah, you're right. Just letting all of that information feed in and sort of settle into a position so that you can make a proper assessment of where things are at. And as I'm going along, I'm sort of having a look at this, reminding myself of what the elements are in the Scrum Guide, and using that to come up with where we're doing things really well, and making sure the team know where they're doing things really well, and then also finding those areas for improvement as well, or suggestions for improvement. So yeah, they're the two things really: is just listening, letting it seep in, and comparing that against the Scrum guide to work out where we can
One of the things you
improve
did
things.
recently was take the team through really like a Scrum basics. Here's the framework. Here's all the components of it.
Mm,
I like that because it was your point of view. Here's I loved some of your the language, like agile doesn't exist to me. There's Scrum. Agile is a dirty word in your mind. I remember that from the
it is.
presentation, and it just sets the team in a really good level playing field. Some of the members of the team have been practicing Scrum for 4 or 5 years, others for a few months. Some of them are certified, some of them are not, and it just gives everybody
Mm.
a really good baseline. Okay, so this is how Matt understands the framework and would like us to continue to apply it. Brings everybody up to that a similar level of knowledge. Is that
Yeah,
something you've done
exactly right.
before? Is just to kick
It,
off with that?
yeah, that it's something that I tried to do. This time I actually did that a little bit differently than I have done before. Normally, I do a much bigger, longer presentation on, it's almost the half day introduction
Right.
to Scrum sort of thing, which I think is becoming a little bit more overkill the more people have become familiar with Scrum and how it works. So yeah, I actually chose to sort of make it a bit leaner this time and just focusing on the framework, all the different elements of the Scrum guide, different events, and et cetera, and using that as a bit of a launching point to remind everybody of, this is sort of the ideal that we're trying to achieve from Scrum, and we've got a way to go in this area, this other area. Um, you're doing maybe a little bit too well. I don't know if you remember that courage section. Yeah, a team taking on way too much work every sprint and never delivering it. So yeah. I think it's just a good, because even though that Scrum guide's like only 13 pages, that's not much to it. There's still a lot to it, if you know what I mean. It takes a lot to understand it and apply it well. So yeah, that's why I actually thought that this time it would make it better to just provide that view of these are the elements that we're trying to implement. Values, empiricism, and all those different areas, and just focusing on some of the ones that we we probably need to improve on a little bit. I think. And I think it gives a much better level playing field for everybody to sort of do a little bit of a reset. And I
Yeah.
think even over time, like when we were working together on RSEQ, it went for a couple of years. There was a couple of semi resets that we needed to do to sort of get everybody focused back again to say, let's get back to basics and make sure we're delivering it well. So, yeah, I think a refresh on the idea of what it is, because while we've got this framework, it is just a framework. What we're delivering is a product, which is what takes most of the time on
Yeah.
everybody's day. So, everybody's not always thinking about the framework in which we do it. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that provides a simpler, base layer for us to then keep coming back to. And for me, from a coaching perspective, it then allows me to say in future, like, do you remember these elements? I don't know, we could pick one of the values of openness, perhaps. Make sure we're being open. It allows you to just refer back to that a little bit more simply.
Yeah.
And trying to keep it as simple as possible, knowing that people are trying to deliver a complex product all at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's my thinking there.
Yeah, you brought up an important lesson there that even over a long period of time practicing Scrum, teams can drift away from the original framework. They
Mm,
introduce some of their own
mm,
technical practices, perhaps.
yep.
There are new stakeholders that come and go, maybe some changes in the team composition as well. And suddenly
Mm,
we have 20-minute stand-ups instead of 15-minute daily scrums. And we wait for the
yes.
scrum master to arrive before we kick off the daily
Yep.
scrum. And just some little
Yeah.
unconscious habits, I think, can creep in.
That's
So that
right. Yeah.
reset,
Yep.
even for a long running team, can be a really helpful mechanism just to get back to the basics.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, and it's part of the coaching element. I think that's a non-stop part of being a Scrum Master. It's not a day goes by, I don't think, where you sort of don't really need to remind someone to say, whatever it might be. make sure we're being empirical about this, or whatever it might be. So that it's an ongoing process as well. So yeah.
So you don't find there are some people who would say that the job of a scrum master is to work themselves out of a job, to set up a, you know, a team that is self-managing and can handle itself and doesn't need a scrum master anymore. Why would you need to have a scrum master once the team is up and running? What would you
Yep,
say to
yep.
that challenge? And why is the need for a scrum
Oh,
master perennial rather than, acute?
yeah, yeah. I actually I agree with it. Like that is your goal. Like if you can get to the point where you're not coaching the team and they do understand and the framework, and they understand the reasons behind the framework, they're applying it and they're building a beautiful product with lots of value in it. Yeah, job done. You can sort of tick that off and say, in an ideal world, that's where you'd love to get to as a scrum master because you've then achieved your goal. But reality being different to ideal, it's not quite as realistic as that, I think. But it does leave time. Uh, so if you've still got that scrum master role, there's still other elements of value that you can provide because it's not just to the Scrum team, right? Like
Right.
you've got your other responsibilities. You're assisting the product owner to help come up with ways of managing the backlog. You've got the responsibility of advocating Scrum to the rest of the organization. So whether that's advocating a nexus be set up,
Right.
etc. And those sorts of things to the organization as well. So if you do get to the point where the team have taken on that Scrum framework and are really living the values, that can open up some time for a Scrum Master to start focusing on some of the other responsibilities as well. So yeah, it's not just around that Scrum team.
Yeah, I liken it to
Mm.
a professional sports team, the best rugby teams in the world or soccer teams in the world or
Mm.
whatever sport, or even, golfers or tennis pros. They might have been professional since they were teenagers, and here they are in their mid-20s or 30s or 40s, and they still got a coach. Why? Because
Mm.
there's always something to improve. There's always something you need to remind them on.
Yep.
Some mindset things, some technique things, and their life has changed.
Yep.
Their competition has changed, and it's the same in our Scrum teams. The composition of our teams
Mm.
change, the environment changes, the stakeholders move on. So we always need that coaching continually.
Yeah.
I love your
Yeah.
aspiration of
Agreed.
working your way out of a job, but I don't think we're going to be getting rid of you anytime soon.
Yeah. No. I don't think so either.
Do you think there's any difference about being a Scrum Master for a business applications team compared to applying the Scrum framework and being a Scrum Master for a team building some other type of product, particularly
Mm.
custom development, which is where Scrum's origins came from, was the development of custom software. Do you think configuring and
Yeah.
deploying business applications is that much different?
No, I don't think so. You really, from what I've seen, anyway, and to be honest, most of my Scrum Master roles have been in the Power Platform and Dynamics. I've only done one that wasn't, and it was web focused. So I don't notice too much difference. You're still using, like, the team still used very similar concepts, right? Like, to deliver, we'll have CI/CD pipelines to deliver it through. That's how we actually move our value through our quality process and things like that. So a lot of the things not that different, to be honest. It might have been different in 10 years ago when I first started in Dynamics. Probably a little bit different then, because it's matured a lot as a product.
Yeah.
I think so. It's you know you can now create those pipelines, or Power App makers can start deploying their own pipelines, and it's really matured over time. And I think what we are trying to really do with the Scrum framework is to deliver really great value, something that means something to the business and drives those outcomes. Um, so no, I think it's quite similar role in both. Like if I went to another role, and when I was doing this web role, I was using all the same tools, all the same approaches, trying to adapt the mindset for people, and yes, so very, very similar. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting. 'Cause
it's
I've had a couple of conversations recently with people who say that Scrum and business applications shouldn't or couldn't or can't go together, and I don't really understand their perspective because I haven't, like you, I haven't used Scrum outside of business applications much at all. But I've heard and I've seen and I've read case studies of it being applied in all sorts of industries and sectors
mm,
and with all
mm,
sorts of teams building all kinds of complex products, not just software, but educational programs or marketing campaigns or school curricula or whatever it might be. And I just, for those
yeah, yeah.
folks who are
I
struggling to apply it to business applications,
yeah, I don't
there's a
see
mindset thing we need to look at.
why. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's a mindset thing probably, and also not understanding the Scrum framework and what it's trying to achieve. It's trying to achieve value through empiricism.
Right.
You can sort of summarize it as that. So if that's not what you're doing, then you're not really doing Scrum, and so you probably just haven't applied the framework
Right.
particularly well. I think. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's my thoughts.
And I've heard that rebuttal as well. So, some people have
Okay.
maybe worked on a Scrum project and it hadn't gone so well, and they blame the framework. And the people who love practicing Scrum would say, "Oh, maybe you weren't applying it properly," which is always our best defense,
Yeah.
right? Oh,
Yeah.
don't blame the
Sure.
framework, blame your application of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I can understand that would be annoying to somebody who's recovering from a horrific project
Oh,
where they
absolutely.
felt
Yeah.
that Scrum was a hindrance and not a help.
Yeah. 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 Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody's been through a horror project at one point or another. So there's nothing that will heal those wounds.
So, in terms of you touch there on understanding the Scrum framework, how important is it, do you think, for product owners and developers in the Scrum team to take Scrum training to get maybe certification? Have you seen that work really well and they become a lot more productive and the contribution has
Yeah.
become a lot more valuable because they've had that training and certification? Or is it more of a tick box exercise to boost the value of your LinkedIn profile and move on to the next role? Um, what's your
For
thoughts on
the
training and certification these days?
certification part, yeah, I love getting certifications myself because it's good to advertise that I do know my stuff. I've passed these difficult exams,
Yeah,
and I know my stuff in order to pass those exams. But I think the training element is key. Like those, like as we mentioned before, just those short refresh sessions, just to set the groundwork of what it is that we're trying to work with here, really are very critical to understanding it. And I think putting in, I think that session I ran was only an hour or 2 hours, digging down into the details of how it can work, and giving lived sort of examples
right.
in training of how it works is really important. Because a lot of the questions, and I think I got one just last week. Someone in the team asked, you keep saying these things about how a daily scrum should be run, and can you, like, where you're meant to focus on your sprint goal and how you're going to get there by the end of the sprint. Um, the One of the questions I got was like, can you give us an example of a daily scrum and what the discussion should be, and things like that. So it's I think training can help with those sorts of things to run people through those examples of this is the sort of thing that you do in your daily scrum. This is what you're doing in sprint planning. Also, trying to instill that level of understanding of empiricism, which is really key to all of it. And that's not something you can just explain in a sentence. You really need to understand the value that empiricism itself, and yeah, it's not just a simple flick of a switch to turn someone's understanding on,
Yeah.
and to see the value of that. So they're the sorts of areas that I see training being really valuable in. Yeah, so as we had that conversation the other day of, yeah, I think it'd be really great to have a full team training. So when you're kicking off that product, um, put the team on a training course of Scrum with lived examples, and put them through those so that they can actually see it working and
Yeah.
see what we mean and it makes that team a little bit easier to coach then, because you're just reminding them of the things that have previously been through and things like that. Yeah. So training, yes. Certification, if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel largely the same way. I don't know if you remember, but we did record a couple of our daily scrums when we worked together in the RACQ project. A couple of the Odyssey teams, we were in one of the meeting
That's
rooms
right.
and we recorded them. So those are available as in the Amazing Applications back catalog somewhere. I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes for people who want to.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
Good.
who want to listen in on a Matt Venamore facilitated daily scrum. It's a few years ago, but
Yeah.
I don't think we did sprint planning or a sprint review or retrospective live recordings. Those meetings tend to be a little bit longer than 15 minutes.
A bit longer, yeah. That's right.
I think sharing, if you have a coach or a trainer who's got those real life examples, that's critical. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy delivering training to the business applications community, because there are some great Scrum trainers available. Some of them are also Microsoft MVPs, but none of them have got business applications experience. And so when people go on a 2-day training course with a certified Scrum trainer or a professional Scrum trainer, that trainer is unlikely to have ever heard of Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform.
Yeah, that's right.
It has no examples to share with you.
Yep.
So yeah, it's something I really appreciate working through with our community is sharing those examples. And that's why we love to have guests on like you to give us that real life experience.
Yeah.
Think about Scrum Masters. We talked about Scrum Masters joining a new Scrum team. What about the experience for product owners and developers when a new Scrum Master joins? What can they do? What should they do? Should they be on their best behavior for a couple of weeks and try and fake it while the new Scrum Master is assessing their performance? Or
now that I've let the cat out of the bag on
that's
observation.
Right. What can they do whenever a new Scrum Master joins the team to really help that person be successful and really, which will lift hopefully the performance of the whole team?
I think the answer is transparency. Just keep doing what you were doing, so that we get to see how you work. Right. Is the main thing. Yeah, because that's what I want to see as a Scrum Master is knowing how you do things at the moment, because it's not so much about how they've implemented the framework, but it's just a really good way of getting to know the people in your team, and seeing how they work, because that's that's sort of something that sits outside the Scrum guide. It's more of a leadership thing, in terms of understanding who it is on your team, understanding how they work, their preferences, things that they do because of their personality, which is all fine, and they're all the things we really need to work with. So, just being yourselves, being transparent, is key to that, I think. And probably after that, being a bit flexible in terms of how we deliver our product. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever encountered a team that is maybe a bit resistant or skeptical or, I don't know, bitter? And you've had to work really hard to dig them out of a dark place?
Yeah.
Or find yourself being pushed away by a team who doesn't really appreciate the Scrum Master's help? Any challenging situations you found yourself in?
Yeah, definitely. It's
sorry, I don't mean to bring up bad memories.
just little twitches. That's all right. I'm good to talk about it now. It's a couple of years ago. No, just kidding. Yeah, like there's some people who, and it's one of the reasons, like, as you said before, that I struggle with the term agile, and people who have say, "Oh no, we're being agile." Really? You're probably not, because you just used that word.
You don't like the word, I know. It's funny.
And those people are. It's even more difficult to get those people to change their mindset than people who would just prefer to do waterfall. And I was in. It was a couple of years ago now. And they were a federal government organization, and they had all of these processes around Agile, and none of it was delivering value in the way that you would expect the Scrum framework to deliver it in. So people were very resistant to doing it, like where I did that sort of reset thing again, saying, this is what we've got, this is what we're working towards, these are the areas that we need to improve on, were, very resistant to it. And I don't, it's probably a cultural thing that I came across there. And, apart from me and one other Scrum Master who was there, he was awesome. And he kept hitting the same thing. Like from a cultural perspective, there was no support from the executives, and therefore the teams felt like they weren't supported. So it was very difficult to manage that situation from a cultural perspective. I may have made some improvements over my time there, but overall, I wasn't able to change the mindset. They effectively just implemented mini waterfall.
Okay. It's tough when there's a leadership culture that's put in place that way, that people are just feel ingrained in it and they're not empowered to change it. Even if they wanted to change their mind, they seem unable to sometimes.
That's right. It's not an easy process to go through, right? Like I hear the business transformation and agile transformation mentioned a lot. Like a transformation is a very serious undertaking, even for an individual, let alone a corporation. So it can't be taken on lightly and thinking you can just hire some people to transform your organization. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I prefer just to work at the team level, to be honest. I'm not here to transform an entire organization and have dozens of Scrum team or dozens of Scrum masters and agile coaches running around the place. I just take on one team at a time, one product at a time, and I really enjoy it. We build some great apps
It's about the product.
Yeah,
that's right.
Think about your own performance, though. Any doozies as far as things you've done as a Scrum Master that you look back on and go, "Oh, what was I thinking?" Any regretful moments or learning opportunities that you've come through you can share with us?
The first one is probably using a definition of ready. That's it seemed like a really good idea at the time. There's definitions for done, right? So let's work out what our definition is when we're ready to start working on it.
It can be a sore spot, that developers starting to work on a product backlog item that just when they get into it just isn't ready. So let's put a definition in place. That's got to be the way to fix it, right?
Yes, it seems like a logical way of approaching it, but the outcome is not like that whatsoever. It becomes a stage gate. Not always. With an analyst who is there to, check everything along the way, I think for certain mindsets that can then become a stage gate. It doesn't get to ready until it's been overanalyzed, which then stops the empirical learning by doing. So it then sort of gets stuck in this loop of getting ready before it gets to the point of actually being worked on. So it's while you can have some guidelines as to when a story is ready, I think that really needs to come from the refinement that happens between the discussion in the team, and the team then need to make the call. Yes, this story is ready. I know enough, and I'm happy to start working on it. So it becomes more of a discussion than a definition. I think is the way to manage that much better. Because the definition of ready just became a stage gate, and it really slowed everything down. And the outcome of that is that there wasn't enough stories for our 3 squads at the time to work on. So that's a learning. I'm not going to do definition of ready again.
I think I've seen it used temporarily, for a few sprints to help teams improve the quality of the product backlog items. As long as, like you said, it's a set of reminders. It's not a set of criteria that have to be checked off. It's not a checklist.
Yes,
You know,
it's
you
not a
don't need
checklist.
to have
Yeah,
the product owner's manager sign here before the
yeah,
team can start
exactly.
development.
Yeah,
But it just
exactly
says, you
right.
know, have we estimated it? Do we understand the acceptance criteria? Are all the developers
Mm.
comfortable with it? You know, those kinds of gentle reminders can be useful
Yeah,
to
yeah,
improve the quality
mm.
of the items.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
a delicate one
Absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It is. Yeah, yeah, and I think trying to get the mindset in place where it's around a discussion with the team
Yeah,
to determine when it's ready. So yeah,
good.
so in the retrospectives, that can come back as a learning to say, oh no, this story wasn't ready. What was it that we missed out in this story? You know, did we need a little bit more of this or that, or
Right.
understanding, or you know, we didn't have the list of fields ready, or I don't know, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
So yeah,
correct.
yeah. So
And I
just
think
pushing it through the cycle.
it's also important that there's openness and trust within the team so that anybody can speak out and say, hey, I don't mind feeling stupid in front of the team, but I don't understand that story yet. Or, hey,
Mm,
have we
mm,
forgotten the test implications of this story or the security implications of this story? Because we seem
mm.
to have not described
Yeah.
that or discussed that when we discussed that particular item. And I'm scared it's
Mm,
going to blow up and take longer than we expected. So if we have that
yeah. Yeah.
environment where anybody can speak out, that goes a long way without having to put a definition in place.
Absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah. That safety is a key thing, a key element in teams, and I've only sort of just been putting that into practice in the last couple of roles that I've been in. Yeah, and trying to judge and understand that there is a safety for the team to be able to bring out those things because it's a key element of transparency, right? You can't be transparent if you're not feeling safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
People
so
have to
yeah,
hide something
it's
or not speak up. Yeah,
exactly that's right.
yeah.
That's right. So yeah, it's something that I sort of actively work on now.
A couple of more questions for you, Matt. What do you think is the appropriate level of technical experience for a Scrum Master in a Dynamics 365 or Power Platform team? Do you think you need to have had hands-on experience building apps before, maybe using apps before to be an effective Scrum Master? You know, could you, I don't know, parachute in tomorrow to a Java development team, having never been a Java developer, and be as good a Scrum Master as you are in a Dynamics 365 team? Or do you think product experience is critical?
Yeah, I think product experience, well, maybe not critical. Um, it really eases the path of what it is you're doing. Like the example that I can think of, so like, you know, I can understand a backlog of Dynamics story cards really easily. Whereas when I worked on the web one, it just took me a bit longer to sort of understand what is that story even about. I don't get that one at
Right.
all. And then you have to go back to the team to get an understanding. It just slows things down a bit. I don't think it's critical, but yeah, it is valuable. Definitely, because you know, I can add things to conversations as well
Yeah.
as part of the refinement sessions, and you know, I can throw out a question here and there that isn't a silly one, and is valued by the team. Um, so yeah, it certainly is valuable, not critical. What I would say though is that I have begun to think that it is critical for a product owner to have
Mm.
that experience and knowledge of the platform so that
Ooh.
they can help drive it in the direction that it needs to. Um,
Well, that's a
um,
whole nother podcast
yeah.
episode, I think, on the qualities of a great
Yes. Yeah.
product owner.
Possibly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just there's a whole lot of thoughts that were coming in there, so I'll put them on hold.
All right, next time we'll come back and circle around on that one. The
Yeah.
last thing
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on, because you and I have worked together in a couple of environments where we've had multiple Scrum teams. So we found
Yep.
ourselves having 10 or more developers and we have to
Yep.
split
Yep.
the team into two. And then I think we had three at one stage. I think
Yeah.
back
We
down to
did.
two,
Yeah.
I think. Um,
Yep.
what's your experience been like scaling Scrum? Some Scrum practitioners think don't, you know, try and avoid scaling Scrum, keep a small team uh, for as long as you can. Others are quite comfortable with 3, 4, 5, 6 Scrum teams. When does it make sense? When is it too
Mm.
hard? What are the critical things to bear in mind when you're thinking about scaling Scrum, and is it really
Yeah.
necessary?
Yeah, I think it is necessary. But what's because I think what did we had like 25 people or something, I think, in total working on the platform Dynamics. Um, And yeah, it would have been a little bit too much, I think, because you start to at that point, and I coach team on using Three Amigos to get those discussions going within the team. That just becomes a little bit too big to manage that with a team of that size. So yeah, it's definitely valuable to do that. And I think, as you remember, we got the team to help work out. They self-managed that split
Yes.
as well. And one of the things that came out of that split as well is that it made more sense. You have to be careful, I think, to make sure that your Scrum teams aren't split down technical lines. And that's one thing that when we did that, it worked quite well because it was almost like a sub product team
Yes.
with that we had working. So we were sort of they had two different visions of what it was that they were building, even though they were using the same platform. So, effectively two different products almost. And that worked really well. The element that I think didn't work well is working with other teams, agile teams, doing integration and other platforms. Really, if we were working on one product, we should have had some of those people embedded in our team so that we were delivering integration at the same time as
Yeah.
delivering that piece of work. That was a big struggle.
Yeah.
I think so. That would be a learning that I would encourage is to make sure you have that cross-functional element, including integration, migration, even if you can,
Yeah.
and all of those sorts of things. Yeah, because then it makes it easier for the product owner to be able to say, at the end of this sprint, this is what I want to see. I want to see this thin strip working end to end, including migration bits, data integration as well,
Yeah.
and things like that. So,
Yeah. We created a lot of
yeah,
dependencies for ourselves by having separate work streams. Is that API
yeah,
ready yet? Oh, what sprint have you got that in? Oh, we need it now.
yes,
Can you start? Oh, it was just we weren't
yeah,
self-managing enough. We couldn't control our own destiny. We're always relying on other people, and that just created a lot of
yeah,
dependencies and
exactly.
held us up.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, and the scaling as well became difficult there because when you scale that, and we scaled it using a sort of a Nexus framework. But those became the discussions. Like, when are you ready so that we can then be ready? And you're just trying to manage dependencies across teams. Whereas if you build your teams more so around a product or a sub product or something, it's less likely that you'll have crossover
mhm.
and need to do those sorts of dependency management because they can just be managed within each of the Scrum teams.
Yeah.
You still would need your Nexus to manage the overall delivery, uh, but it would be a much more lightweight Nexus than otherwise.
Yeah, great discussion. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for coming and joining us on the show. I wonder if you could,
Pleasure.
for those who want to stick around and get to know you a little bit better, are you okay to hang on for 5 minutes? I'd love to do a retrospective with you and discover a little bit more about
Well,
your background, how you got started. So for those of you who have joined us, Matt is an expert Scrum Master I've had the pleasure of working with on several projects, building several products together. How did you get started in your Dynamics 365 career? Were you practicing Scrum first and then Dynamics, or was it the other way around? How did you get into this whole game, Matt?
yeah, it was a bit of a crossover in my career, I guess. When I fell into Dynamics, I think as most people do in a project. Oddly enough, a project that we're now replacing 12 years later. Um,
Wow.
so yeah,
So
that
this
was
was
my
your first
first
Dynamics
foray.
project.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
that's
Wow.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So and at that point in my career, I'd been I'd done development for, I don't know, 10 years, something like that. Then software delivery manager for 5 years, where I'd started getting into the agile side of things, but I hadn't actually come across Scrum at that point.
right.
So I didn't, yeah. So I've been trying to implement, just the multitude of agile tools that are out there, and just using those to sort of pull things together without a clear framework. Um, and at that point, I had decided that I wanted to learn a bit more about the business side of things. So I took some roles as a business analyst, and one of the first ones just happened to be this Dynamics project. And then I just got hooked from there. I think nearly every project I've worked on since then has been a Dynamics related project.
Right.
Yeah,
Cool.
so it was just one of those things. And then on one of those projects, they hired a Scrum coach who take the whole project through the Scrum framework and a delivery method, and then it just sort of all clicked into place. Like my previous experience of been looking at agile things, then the Scrum framework made it all sort of fall into place for me. Yeah, that's why I started loving the Scrum framework, because it had direction, it had a reason for being, it was there to deliver value, and these are the ways of doing that. So it was just again an accidental. You fall into the right place and discover something that you love. So I did that with both Dynamics and Scrum. Although, as I say to everybody, I love Scrum and I love Dynamics most days. So it's it has its frustrations. So, but still, I'm still here, still loving doing it, and loving the journey of watching it turn into the Power Platform and become this great tool set and platform for delivering almost anything.
I was just reflecting on the first time I think I met you was I saw you present at a user group meeting. And in fact, we had our local Brisbane business apps user group meeting last night, and you were presenting in that same room probably 10 years ago when I first saw you.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah,
Okay.
it feels a
Yeah,
lifetime
yeah.
ago.
Yes, it does. It does.
Final question then, because I know you live in Brisbane, you've got a few kids at home, you must have
Yep.
some favorite Lego sets. What are the Venamore family into in terms of Lego? What's your favorite Lego set at home?
I'm actually the biggest Lego person in the house. My twin boys, they're okay with it. One of
Right.
my boys, he loves Lego as much as I do. He's an Ninjago sort of dude. He
Yeah.
loves those. But for me, it's most of my kit is either Star Wars currently. So any Star Wars kit, I'm up for it and keen on. Um, that hails from my Benny days as a youngster, running around screaming spaceships.
Yeah.
That's me all over.
Yeah,
So
there's been
anything
a
space
bit of
related.
a resurgence in the old Lego space sets, and I think they've republished some sets from when I grew up in
Really?
the
Oh,
80s.
okay. Yeah,
And
right.
that
Okay.
classic Lego space stuff is
Yeah.
tugs at my heartstrings.
No.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, oh, it does. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's very good. I rebuilt a bunch of my space Lego sets during COVID when there was no chance to leave the house. So I'm going to continue that little fun journey of reminiscing my youth. Yeah, so no, it's good.
Well, folks, thanks so much for joining us. Matt, been a pleasure to have you on. We'll make sure we include links to your social media and where people can find you, your LinkedIn profile, and everything will be in the show notes. And really appreciate you coming on today. Thanks so much.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's been really good.